So, who at your company is responsible for cybersecurity? Is it the IT guy? Is it the Chief Information Security Officer? Or is it the Board of Directors? So, I just want to take these next few minutes just to discuss kind of the mindset that the corporation has versus reality. So a lot of times the CISO or the IT guy or whoever's really holding that cybersecurity card at the organization, regardless of size, tends to be kind of the fall guy. If there's a breach, if there's some ransomware hits, a threat actor gets in and breaches all the data, whatever, um, they're always looking at the IT guy. They're always looking at the cyber guy. Usually that IT guy or the cyber director has no budget to work with, has already been, rejected on all their attempts to get funding to replace technical debt or to improve the situation, has fought an uphill battle as far as organizational change, even things that are free that the organization doesn't want to implement because it's an inconvenience or it's a change in how they do things. For instance, multi-factor authentication. Nowadays, MFA should be required on literally everything, not just administrative accounts. If you're signing into email, VPN, any cloud app, you should be required to MFA now. That's just normal hygiene. However, a lot of companies have resisted doing that. And then when they get ransomware, they're going to blame the security guy. So, in the end, most CISOs usually report to the CIO, which is already a conflict of interest, and I can go into that later. But most of them, most chief information security officers, are reporting to someone in such a way that they don't really have power over what's going on. They can't govern security. They can't make change. They can't set budget. All they can do is really, say that this is our risk, which is important enough. Identifying the risk is obviously a first step. Some information security officers don't report to the board or don't, even if they're reporting to the CIO or the CTO or the CFO or the CEO, they're not giving their findings to the board. In that case, it's getting parroted, or there's a game of telephone with their direct report and the board, which means the board may not be getting the whole picture. This is where that conflict of interest between the CIO and the CISO exists. The CISO should never, never be a direct report of the CIO. The CIO is responsible for innovation, for maintaining and improving information systems for the organization. They are incentivized to move production as fast as possible. So in a company where there's coding happening, the CIO is the one driving, more production, more releases out to the wild, things like that. Where security is going to want to slow them down and look at them and inspect them and make sure that everything's right. CIO inherently is against security. CIO wants to push everything out the door as fast as possible. So yes, there are some security-centric CIOs that actually care about security, but I've spoken to several that do not, that are basically saying you can be the security guy, but stay out of my way, that kind of thing. And that makes it really hard when the security team needs to put some code review in the CI/CD pipeline, when they need to do pen testings before something's released into the wild, when they need to get budget for a new firewall or new zero trust architecture implementation or new EDR. There's obstacles that they're having to jump over in order to get that funding, and it's the CIO getting in their way. So that reporting relationship should never happen anyway. But a lot of times CISO will report to the CFO, which makes sense because the CFO is managing financial risk for the organization, and really that's what the CISO is doing as well. So it can be any number of reporting relationships. The ideal, obviously, is direct reporting to the board, but in most organizations, the CEO is the one directly reporting to the board, and everybody else is reporting to the CEO, which is fine also. But as a head of security in the organization, the CISO should be a peer to the CTO and the CIO and the CFO, should not be reporting to them. And that is because of that conflict of interest, and because they are a peer. They should be paid like the top level executives in the company. The CISO should be treated like a top executive in the company, and is responsible for all these things, right? The organization's putting all kinds of blame and onus on that CISO. So here's where the variance goes. The company sees the CISO, or that IT nerd, as the guy in charge of cybersecurity for the organization, when really the responsibility for governance of cybersecurity is at the board, not at the CISO. The CISO in a lot of companies feels kind of toothless and powerless because they don't have that board backing, because they're trying to make change and improve cybersecurity with no authority, no budget, no power to do so or to make change in the organization. And that's funny because really that power lies at the board, and the board is the one who's ultimately responsible for governing risk in the organization, including governing cybersecurity. So the SEC this year in 2022 proposed a change on how cybersecurity is viewed in public companies, really giving that responsibility to the board, saying that the board is responsible for disclosure to the investors, is responsible for managing risk to the organization, is responsible for cyber risk management, security and governance, and incident reporting. That is at the board. That is not at the CISO level. The CISO obviously is an instrument, is the executive within the org chart that's responsible for getting these things done, but all of that power is at the board. And so the SEC is now holding the board responsible for these things. So in this world where the CISO is always the one that gets fired after an incident, it's usually the board's fault, if you think about it. Usually the CISO is identifying risk that needs to be mitigated, is doing their job and is being responsible, and is pushing everything, their findings, their recommendations, everything to the board and getting shut down, or pushing it up to the CIO and getting shut down. So really the CISO in this is not responsible. If anything, that CIO should be getting fired, or whoever that direct report is that's shutting that finding down. So my heart goes out to a lot of CISOs in the community that are stuck in these situations where they're not able to make change. They're not able to make decisions. They're not able to enforce anything, and the board does not have their back. So there's a lot of onus on the CISO to communicate clearly to the board about their needs and, identify that risk so the board is well informed and so the board can make the right decision. So the ultimate decision makers in the company are the board. So that's something that I want to clear up here, is that is really the board is the one responsible for all of this. So in the public sector now, it's lying squarely at the board. It's when there's a breach that happens, it's really the board's responsibility to not only notify but make sure that that's being oversaw. So according to SEC, the board of directors has some roles in um, risk management, that they have to be um, you know contributing to um, that improvement and overseeing the risk of the company, and that failing to oversee that is contributing to unreasonably risky behavior. And that cyber board is really responsible uh, for empowering the CISO to get their work done and to improve the situation. So when we're thinking about responsibility structures and org charts in a business, and we're trying to think about how to improve the situation, don't bury cybersecurity, don't bury the CISO, because ultimately, as the executive or owner or board of directors of the organization, you are the one responsible. So you want to empower that CISO so that you're not the one who gets in trouble when an event happens, because you are the one who is responsible for this. The CISO is the one just helping you out.